Well, what do we got on the bench today? Let's see. It's got a nice handmade denim cover. Oh, backwards. What is this? A little 112 combo. We think it's from the late 50s or early 60s. It's been recovered. What is it? It's a Gibson. We think a GA-40T or a Gibson Les Paul amp. Probably from, I don't know, late 50s or early 60s. We're gonna try to figure this out as we go. So let's drink her in a little bit. The owner, he's in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, bought this amp when he was a teenager. We bought it used. So he bought it in 1962. And the band he was in at the time, everybody had their speakers and amps covered in this red Tulex. I guess he said a seamstress did it, and she did a really, really nice job. Looks very cool. The amp was originally tweed, and because it's got this tilt back on the speaker grill, I'm thinking it is a probably Gen 3 or 4 Gibson GA-40. Well, as you can see, I'm into day 3 on recapping this Gibson GA-40. Gibson, in their infinite wisdom in '59, put all the capacitors on the back of the board instead of the top. So I tried to troubleshoot it. I got the hum out of the amp, and I got the The channel 1, clean, sounds great. Cool. But the tremolo wasn't working right, and you guessed it, all those yellow Jupiter vintage caps are part of the tremolo frequency and depth circuit and the anti-thump circuit. Well, because everything's on the back side, they're all wired in from the bottom. You can see it had this is the old vintage wire. I'm trying to leave as much as I can. But all these jumper wires that run to the tube sockets, I ended up replacing all of that. I'm using Gavit vintage cloth covered wire, pre-tinned. It's really a nice wire, good to work with. But I had to lay me out a little map, and I recorded every single node with a little number so that I knew I was getting the caps in the proper polarity and the amp was wired right. Someone had to recap the power supply in this and didn't use stock value caps. And in fact, I found the center tap for the output transformer landed to the wrong ground, which was the source of the hum. So, yep, I'm going to keep going with this. Wish me luck. Got my Les Paul copy here. We're going to try the bridge humbucker because that's like where it sounds. Amp's plugged in. If I turn the guitar down, volume all the way up, tone all the way up, it makes no noise. So let's back this down to like 3. Here's the tone pot. So the pots are clean, but this amp's a fire breather, so that's barely on. And it's already breaking up a little bit. And I think it's the tubes, because there's a slight high frequency distortion, and it might just be the age of the tubes. But it turning up to about 4, you can get it tweedy sounding big time. I don't know the lyrics, but that's pretty cool. And then the other thing I think it sounds like is, but I've been told Eskimo pussy is mighty, mighty cold. So very cool. I'm going to go through and test V1, through V7 in order. I made myself a little pallet, a little nest to keep the tubes safe. Here's the first 5879. It's got orange brand lettering on it. I can't tell what it is, the brand, but you can clearly read it's a 5879 tube. And my Syncor Mighty Mite telling me we've got about, I don't know, focus in, almost 90% emissivity, and there is no grid leakage. Awesome. And of course all the short tests pass. All the short tests pass. So I'm going to go through and check all these tubes. If I find anything interesting, I'll clue you in. Well, if you've hung out to this point, 1,000 thank yous. I tried to make my videos entertaining as we go because, repairing amps can be really, really dry. So I didn't do, I filmed everything I did, but when I listened back to it, it was just blathering, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to condense that all down here real quick. What you're looking at is the sum total of replacement parts in this amp. When I first got it, it hummed so bad that the user just didn't enjoy playing it. It still worked, but wow, did it hum. So I thought, yeah, I'll put 2 hours of replacing the power supply caps in. But it looks like this amp was serviced probably back in 1961 or 62. The original Astron power supply electrolytic caps were replaced with those big, ugly Mallories. And whoever did it put capacitors way too big. It's supposed to have one 20 microfarad cap upstream of the choke and 3 10 microfarads downstream. What you're looking at is two 20 microfarad Mallories upstream of the choke, which is too big of a load on the 5Y3 rectifier. I'm shocked the rectifier hasn't burned up. In any case, I bought all new F&Ts, so it's got the original size caps, 120 upstream of the choke and 310 microfarad downstream of the choke. What was strange is the way the amp was grounded. The bias circuit's supposed to be grounded to the center tap of the heater output. And it was not. It was grounded to ground of the amp. So most of the hum was coming from that. So I don't know if tech goofed that up or I lost track of what I was doing. Once I regrounded it to the right place and put the correct caps in, hum was gone, amp worked fine. The only issue with it is that the tremolo would work for about 20 seconds and stop. Obviously, it had leaky tremolo caps. This amp's got 5.005 anti-thump caps in the circuit and 3.05 in the depth and rate part of the tremolo circuit. Those are all vintage Astrons. I took all those out and replaced them with vintage Jupiter yellow caps of the same size. I went with Jupiters. They're too expensive in my opinion, but they're 0.005 and 0.05, not the modern values of 0.0047 and 0.047. And I wanted to keep the amp original so it sounded like new. So I dropped the extra cash for those caps. And while I was into it that deep, might as well go for the cathode bypass caps and the tone caps and the coupling caps. So the amp has completely been recapped. There's over, $140 worth of caps in it. Once I got all that done, the amp was functioning fine, but it still had some high frequency distortion. It turns out the half of the secondary of the output transformer was open. So this amp was running in Class A instead of Class AB and red plating the output power tubes. So unfortunately, I had to buy a Mercury Magnetics output transformer. But it tests the same half impedance as the original transformer. So I'm confident this amp sounds just like it did back in 1959 and 60 when it was built. It's a shame that the original output transformer is open, but if the owner user wants to keep this, wants to sell this amp, he could probably get that rewound because I've seen these amps sell for north of $4,000. Why are they that expensive? Number one, they sound like thick tweeds, though. The bass response is fantastic, more than even what Fender had. They do sound awesome. However, I think they're expensive because they're such a pain in the ass to work on. All the caps are on the back side of the board. Gibson, why the hell would you do that? Put the caps on the top side where you can service it without taking the circuit board out. Taking the through-hole circuit board out to get to the caps, all that 60-year-old wiring in there, you move it at all. I had solder joints breaking all over the place. So I bought that vintage Gavit cloth-covered wire. It's new wire, but it looks like, vintage cloth-covered wire. It does have PVC on the inside, and it is stranded soldered wire. It is a joy to work with. It's a bigger gauge and a bit thicker than the original wiring, but that's good. That's good. So I thought what turned into a 4-hour recap job, and bias turned into a 16-hour job across, a couple of months of me doing it at night. But the amp's done. It sounds great. The two biggest challenges were figuring out how to mount, modern caps, modern power supply caps, in an amp that used the original huge power supply caps. So I used the original straps, wire tied them, and then put some silicone in there to keep them stable, but so where you can see, what the value of the caps are. And the last thing I'll say is these amps, they're biased hot as hell. Even originally, back when the voltage was about 110 in the US, these amps were biased up about 86% with that 200 ohm cathode bias resistor. I turned my Variac down to 110 volts, and I was still getting 86% tube dissipation from those 6V6s. And when I turned the house power back up, it was up over 96%. So I had to rebias this amp. I went from 200 ohms up to 250 ohms on the shared cathode bypass cap, and it cooled it down from 96% down to about 84%, which is still a little hot, but I think this amp still has the original power tubes, and they sound better than the replacement JJs I tried. The original tubes, I never believed this, right? But the original tubes do sound better than modern JJs. So, I'm going to torture you with the original song I wrote to demo this amp again. You've heard it once, but I'm going to put it in this video again. The song opens with a neck pickup on a Strat, and then when the solo comes, first half of the solo is neck pickup on a Les Paul. Second half is bridge pickup on the Les Paul, and you'll hear clean tones in position 4 with a Strat going through the tremolo channel. Thanks for hanging around this long. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I liked doing it. This was really a cool amp to work on, and I hope the owner user gets another 60 years of use out of it. Can you believe it? Awesome. Cool. Thanks for watching. Love thy neighbor. Have a good one.